At 21, I found out I was adopted. My parents always tried to hide it. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind where the sun streamed through the windows and bathed everything in a golden glow. I was sitting in my childhood bedroom, flipping through old family photo albums. It was a slow, lazy day, and I had no idea that, in a matter of minutes, my entire world would flip upside down. I had seen these photos a million times, pictures of birthday parties, vacations, Christmas mornings, but something that day caught my eye. It was an old picture of my mom holding me as a baby. She looked younger, her hair styled in a way I didn't remember her ever wearing it. But it wasn't her look that caught my attention. It was the date scribbled on the back in my mom's neat handwriting, June 4, 2002. That date didn't add up. I was born in September of 2001. I sat there, staring at the number, trying to make sense of it. Why would there be a picture of me as an infant taken almost a year later than it should have been? Confusion swirled in my mind, but I brushed it off, convincing myself that it was just a mistake, a wrong date jotted down. But once the thought was in my head, it gnawed at me. It kept popping up over the next few days. I found myself searching for other inconsistencies in the albums, comparing dates and timelines. There were gaps, things that didn't quite fit. Missing months. A few photos where I didn't look anything like either of my parents, something I had never really questioned before. The more I noticed, the more unsettling it became. I brought it up to my mom casually one night while we were having dinner. "Hey, Mom, do you remember when this picture was taken?" I slid the photo of her holding baby me across the table. She glanced at it, and for the briefest moment, her face went tight, just a flicker of something off. But she recovered quickly, smiling and shaking her head. "Oh, that must have been around the time we took you to the beach. I probably just wrote the wrong date." Her explanation seemed reasonable enough. I wanted to believe her. But there was something in her voice that felt rehearsed, like she'd said it before, maybe even to herself. I let it go, at least for the time being. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. A part of me began to suspect something bigger was going on, something they weren't telling me. I didn't want to be that paranoid kid questioning everything, but the little things started piling up. Why did my parents never talk about my birth? Why did they never tell stories about my first steps or words? Most of the childhood stories they shared with me started around when I was 2 or 3. It all came to a head when I decided to dig deeper, desperate for answers that my parents wouldn't give me. I knew where they kept important documents, locked away in a drawer in their bedroom. It was a Saturday night, and they were out with friends. I felt guilty as I picked the lock with a hairpin, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. I told myself that if I didn't find anything, I'd drop it. I wouldn't push anymore. Inside, I found old tax returns, insurance papers, and then, at the bottom of the drawer, a small envelope. It was unmarked, nothing special about it. But when I opened it, everything changed. Inside were official-looking documents, papers from an adoption agency. My heart stopped. The top page was a certificate of adoption, with my name printed neatly at the top, but the names listed as birth parents were strangers to me. I stared at the paper, not fully able to comprehend what I was reading. My name was there, but the people who had raised me, who I had called Mom and Dad for 21 years, were listed as the adoptive parents. My head spun as I read and reread the words. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. The room closed in, the air thick with betrayal. Why had they hidden this from me? Why didn't they ever tell me? I felt the heat of anger rising in my chest. Not because I was adopted, I could have accepted that. But because they had lied to me my entire life. Every memory, every birthday, every hug, now felt tainted with secrecy. I was a stranger in my own family. When they came home later that night, I was sitting in the living room, the adoption papers spread out on the coffee table in front of me. They walked in, laughing about something, but their smiles faded as soon as they saw my face, and the papers. My mom's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with panic. My dad froze, looking between me and the documents. It was like they'd been waiting for this moment to happen, dreading it but knowing it was inevitable. "Why didn't you tell me?" My voice was barely a whisper, but the weight of my words filled the room. My mom stepped forward, tears welling up in her eyes. "Jason, we didn't want you to feel different. We wanted you to feel like you were always ours." "But I am different," I snapped, my voice cracking with emotion. "How could you keep this from me? I'm 21 years old, and I'm just finding out." "We were going to tell you," my dad said quietly, his voice filled with guilt. We didn't know how. And then, as you got older, it became harder. We didn't want to hurt you." "Hurt me?" I laughed bitterly. "Do you have any idea how much worse this is? You lied to me for my entire life." My mom's tears spilled over, and she reached for me, but I stepped back. I couldn't bear to be comforted by her, not now. "We love you, Jason. You're our son. That never changed," my dad said, his voice trembling with emotion. I shook my head, trying to process everything. The anger, the hurt, the confusion, it all swirled inside me like a storm. "But it's not true, is it? I'm not your son. Not really." My mom sobbed openly now, her face buried in her hands. My dad stood there, looking utterly defeated. I felt like I was in a nightmare, one that I couldn't wake up from. My entire identity, everything I thought I knew about myself, had just shattered in an instant. I had no idea who I was anymore. And worse, I had no idea if I could ever trust them again. "I need some time," I said finally, my voice cold and distant. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door, not knowing where I was going, only that I couldn't stay there anymore. As I drove aimlessly through the dark streets, 1,000 questions raced through my mind. Who were my birth parents? Why did they give me up? Why did my adoptive parents feel like they had to hide this from me? I didn't have any answers. I didn't know if I'd ever get them. But one thing was clear, nothing would ever be the same again. The family I thought I had was gone, replaced by a truth I wasn't ready to face.